Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be here with you this morning in Brazil to be able to navigate through one other webinar promoted by Kincaid Mendes Viana law firm. And we have been, since last year, covering several topics in different webinars throughout the year related to green shipping, to cyber risks, to registries, to electronics bill of ladings, to the MLC convention. And today we will have a great opportunity to discuss a very important subject of loss prevention and casualty response in offshore operations. Being with great enthusiasm that I here announce our distinguished speakers of the day. We will start our event today with the honorable presence of Vice Admiral Wilson Pereira de Lima Filho, who has over 45 years of service in the Brazilian Navy with very important roles and high performance in each position he occupied as Harbor Master, Navy District Commander, among others, and now here with us speaking in the capacity of President of the Brazilian Admiralty Court. Admiral Lima Filho, it is an honor to have your presence here today with us to talk about the role of the Brazilian Maritime Court in the maritime pollution incidents. As the second speaker of the day, we will have Lewis McDonald, who is a Vice President, Claims and Contract with Scoot Offshore, Specialist Offshore Business Unit within the Scoot P&I Club. Lewis is currently engaged in large-scale wreck removal projects around the globe and has dealt with collision and contact and pollution claims in numerous jurisdictions. Lewis, it is an honor also to have your presence directly from the US, where you are at the moment, and we are very much looking forward to hearing your comments on casualty response from a P&I Club perspective. One brief remark to all participants is that both Admiral Lima Filho and Lewis McDonald have other appointments at 11 o'clock Brazilian time. So they will be opening our event. They will be able to navigate through the chat and eventual questions you might have throughout the first hour of the event. And they will be leaving us by 11 o'clock. And at least we will have a great honor to hear from them in the beginning of our session. As our third speaker of the day, we will have Commander Maria Cecilia Trindade de Castro, Chief of the Environmental Department for the Coastal Zone and Brazilian Jurisdictional Waters at the DPC, the Directorate of Ports and Coasts. With 24 years in service in the Brazilian Navy, having participated in several study groups and operations related to marine pollution, and leading the Brazilian delegation before the IMO in respect to the topic. Commander Cecilia, it will be a great pleasure to have you here with us and your speech on the role of the Brazilian Maritime Authority in the prevention of marine pollution caused by vessels, platforms, and their support facilities. And I am also aware you had a great involvement with the last oil pollution in the Brazilian coast and the experience with the National Contingency Plan, which we will be very much looking forward to hearing about. And last but not least, we will have two distinguished speakers from the private sector, representing some of the most high-performing companies operating in the industry. Hugo Alvarenga Fernandes y Fernandes, Executive Director at Brand Offshore, with over 15 years of experience in OSV market, including vessels design, engineering, shipbuilding, and operations. And also Pedro Perez, COO of Witt O'Brien's Brazil, consultancy firm specialized in providing safety, environmental, emergency, and crisis management solutions with background combined with different engineering disciplines, environmental and petroleum engineering at PUC, MSc in safety, reliability engineering and risk management at Aberdeen University, and PhD at Lloyd's Register Foundation Center for Safety and Reliability Engineering. He has over 17 years of professional experience in the areas of environmental studies, HSC, operational safety management, risk assessment, and emergency management, with emphasis in the oil and gas and mining sectors. Both Hugo and Pedro Perez will be able to present the view of a private participant in this offshore sector, and how to be ready to respond to an offshore emergency. These are the distinguished speakers of the day. I am sure you will have great presentations, great topics to comment on. And for all the participants, you may feel free to post your comments, suggestions, and questions in the chat, and the speakers will be able to access them. So should we have time, we will also open those questions for the debate in the end. Without further ado, I am happy to address the words to Vice Admiral Lima Filho to the opening speech. Please, Admiral, the floor is yours.
Dr. Pedro Calmon Neto, thank you very much for the invitation. For me, it's an honor and a great pleasure to be participating as a speaker. I would like to salute all the other speakers and also all the other professionals of the maritime industry that are assisting us in this channel. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot with all of you. In the beginning of my words, I will say that as a president of the Maritime Court, I would like to say some words about the vocation of our country to the sea, because I know that a lot of people from other countries are having the opportunity to hear me. It's important that you know that the vocation of Brazil is to the maritime activity, and our country is a country committed with the respect and preservation of maritime environment. It is an agenda of all that people that belongs to Brazilian government, especially the Brazilian Maritime Authority, here represented by Commander Cecilia. We have an area that is our jurisdictional waters that we call Blue Amazon. I'd like to tell all of you that we give such an importance to our waters as that you give the name of our Brazilian waters, the name of the Blue Amazon, as important as our Green Amazon. So I start all my presentations saying that our vocation is at sea. And important also that you have the perception that having a maritime court is one of the factors that guarantee our vocation for the sea and the recognition as a really maritime nation. I would like to point all of you that our maritime court is located in the historic building in the port zone of Rio de Janeiro. And also that we are linked directly to the Navy. When when the government realized that we really need a maritime court in 1934 for us to have a reduced number of force of work. We have only 150 people. We are linked to the Navy, and part of the process is accomplished by the captaincies all over our country. And we have really two main tasks as a maritime court. The first one is to judge the extent and facts of navigation. And the second task, the registration of ships and ship owners. So those two are our main tasks here in Brazil. And also, it's important for us to know that the existence of a maritime court give to all the ship owners the certainty they have a legal judgment, and the people that really understand what is judging. We have 7 specialists that are judges, and when we end our judgments, our process, we give this process as an accordance to the legal judge that use this information to take his decisions. Another point that I would like to underline is that we have studied what are the main causes of accidents here in Brazil. As you know, we have more than 15,000 kilometers of rivers. We have more than 8,000 kilometers of coast. And at this moment, all over the world, we have more than 2,000 ships taking goods of interest of Brazilian people. So we are really dependent of the binomial, ship and port. Really, I think today, all the countries of people that are having the opportunity to hear me at this moment have this perception, the importance of the sea, the importance of the ships, the importance of the ports, and also the importance of the sailors that take the ships. So when we talk about accidents, and we have here our statistics, and really you have 6 reasons that are responsible for the great part of the accidents in Brazilian coast. The first one is a non-compliance with rules. The second is fault in operational procedures. The third, the failure of navigation aids inside ship. The deficiency of material. And the last one is action at the environment. So those are the main causes of accidents. But taking in account that today we are talking about offshore maritime activities with focus on pollution incidents. So at this moment, I will address the role of the maritime port in pollution accidents that occur in Brazilian jurisdictional waters. It is important for everyone to know that in the event of an incident of pollution from a vessel, in the Maritime Authority is responsible for determining the environmental impacts resulting from that accident. So they have an administrative procedure that is written by the captaincy, and at the last point, it is judged by the director of port and coasts. Here is the Commander Cecilia. She works in the Directorate of Ports and Coasts. But there is an important issue. Determination of the generation factors in probable causes of the pollution accident on board, intra-vessel, and also the responsibility is also of the responsibility of the Maritime Authority. He opens an inquiry, an administrative inquiry, but the final judgment of this administrative procedure is in the Brazilian Maritime Court. So important that we understand that we have 2 ways. The first way, the impacts in the environment. The Brazilian Maritime Court has no jurisdiction. But when we talk about what happened inside the ship or with the ship, it was a collision, it was a mistake in the sailor, or it was other kind of a procedure not well done, this procedure will be judged by the Brazilian Maritime Court. So the final judgment of this procedure is of the responsibility of the Brazilian Maritime Court. It is also important for us to know that in addition to the judgment and imposition of penalties, as we are an administrative court, on those extent of facts of navigation, the Maritime Court also proposes preventive measures and orientations to improve navigation safety. For example, if during a judgment we identify the need to improve the maritime authority standards or some procedures to improve in some port authority or major agencies in federal, state, or municipal government, we propose to these authorities ways of improving it. And what is interesting, this need for updating or modifying the rules, all our suggestions have been accepted for those authorities. So we have feeling that our job at the end of our judgment, we help to improve the safety of navigation. And also, we have the perception that our actions also contribute strongly to the consolidation of a mentality of safety of navigation. In this context, the Maritime Court also has two tools that contribute to the consolidation of navigation safety. One of them is the accident report judgments that we produce every 4 months, because the document that we produce at the end of each judgment is a document, sometimes with 50, 60 pages. Sometimes maybe, Dr. Pedro, you don't have time to read all of them. But if you give you a resume of 1 page, I'm sure all of you like to read it. So I had the idea of produce this report. So all the accidents that we understand that have some lessons to transmit to the maritime and nautical and fishery community, you include it in our report. Because we understand, Mr. Lewis, that the best way for us to reduce the number of accidents, not only in Brazil, but any part of the world, is knowing, understanding the accidents that happened in the past. Because when you study those accidents that happened in the past, and you disseminate these accidents with the mistakes and also the lesson learned, we are going to help to avoid those accidents in the future. That is our understanding here at the Maritime Court. And I have receiving the feedback from many integrants of the maritime community that are using the Brazilian Maritime Report to the training of people, training of crews, training of people in yacht clubs. So I think it's a good opportunity. And I invite you, all of you that are having the opportunity to hear me, to visit our our page, internet, and we have all those reports available. So another point is that despite of those two tasks that I have mentioned, here at the Brazilian Maritime Court, we have the task also to be aware of everything that's happening in the maritime industry environment. So, for instance, today you have a new, a great new, that is the law, the BR of the sea. So today here at the Maritime Court, we are also studying and also seeing what will be the impacts of this new law, including the decree of the registration of ships will be changed as a consequence of this BR of the sea. So here in our court, we are all the time updated with everything that happens in maritime industry in Brazil, in the world. Autonomous ship is also one of our concern. I'm sure I will not be here, but in the future, our judge will be having the opportunity of judge an accident with autonomous ships. That is an agenda not only of Brazil, but also of IMO. So ending here my words, I want to underline again that Brazil is a country committed with the preservation of a maritime environment. Our maritime court is linked to the Brazilian Maritime Authority, trying to help, trying to all together create a strong mentality of the safety of navigation, also a mentality of preservation of the maritime environment. And our maritime court is a trademark of a maritime nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Admiral Lima Filho. It is always a pleasure to hear you talk about Brazil being a maritime nature and the role of the Admiralty Court with such great enthusiasm. We actually share this enthusiasm, and if we weren't a maritime nation, we wouldn't be here this morning discussing these topics. Actually, for those of you who do not know the Admiralty Court itself, I urge you to visit the court. It is a great, beautiful historical building. It has been during years hidden behind the old perimetral, but now it is lighted and showing itself as a beautiful building in the Olympic Boulevard in Rio de Janeiro. And the building was entirely refurbished, and the Admiralty Court is always open to welcome any visitors to visit its facilities and the judges. I am also a big fan of the initiatives adopted by Admiral Lima Filho in terms of opening the Admiralty Court and information to the general public, not only through electronic proceedings. I'm sorry about that. Also, as you mentioned, about promoting newsletters and bulletins with the news of the latest decisions and judgments and accidents that happen on a frequent basis. Also, the activities in the social media. I think that is always very helpful, not only to show to the public the role of the Admiralty Court, but also to preserve our maritime nation, our maritime nature. And talking about that, I would just like to address a quick note and comment, since I know Admiral Lima Filho will have to leave us before 11 o'clock. But also it's, and you touched a little bit on this topic, which I think it's something very important to highlight, is that the Admiralty Court does not only serve to apply penalties and fines and warnings, but also, and I have seen that in some occasions, very strict decisions determining the study and the adoption of new procedures, of new mechanisms and new actions to be revisited to avoid similar occurrences. So corrective measures is always a sort of penalty, let's say, that is very helpful to prevent future accidents and lessons being learned from the old accidents. I think it is always important to pick that kind of information and use that to study new measures, new rules, and the Admiralty Court have been doing that pretty well. I am happy you talked about this. I would just like to ask if there is normally discussion among judges and even among judges and other authorities about these kind of corrective measures when you see similar incidents happening over and over. Is that something you discuss to try to prevent as a whole?
That's a very good point, Dr. Pedro Calmon. Almost every session we have discussion about this point. Many times, as I presented before, we have situations that we present to the Directorate of Ports and Coasts some suggestion to adjust this norma, and all the times our suggestions were accepted by that representative of the Brazilian Maritime Authority. We have some months ago an event in a port in south of Brazil that we have the perception of a necessity of some change in rules of draft of ships. And we presented to that port authority the suggestion of study that point. We have an accident in a port in northeast of Brazil last month that we thought that the number of tugs in the port were not sufficient. And so we have an accident of a collision because there was only 2 tugs in that moment, and where the port have 3 tugs. So we suggested to the port captain and also to the port authority to study the necessity of increase the number of tugs in that port. So there are some examples. We have some many examples with moto aquática. I forgot how to say in English. Moto aquática.
Jet skis, yeah.
Jet ski. We have many suggestions. Jet ski is not the focus today, but in this area of trying to increase the level of safety in the use of jet skis, we have presented many suggestions to the Brazilian Maritime Authority. And I was in this occasion, I forgot to point one thing about pollution. Someone asked me what is the jurisdiction of the Brazilian Maritime Court in that great pollution crime that you had 2 years ago. If it happened about 400 miles from the coast, does the Maritime Court has jurisdiction? Many times in my webinars, I have this question. So I would like to take this opportunity to say that the answer is yes. We really have jurisdiction, because when you get our organic law in Article 10, we see that even if you have an accident out of Brazilian jurisdictional waters, but if affects the coast affects the Brazilian state, we have jurisdiction. In consequence, the captaincy has the authority to open the administrative inquiry. So this is a question that many people has presented me. Yeah, and also I would like to thank you for the propaganda of the view of our court. I indeed invite you to come here. And the Brazilian citizens feel proud to visit our court, as it was built in 1861. And when you visit us, you can see the beautiness of our court. So I'm waiting for your visit here. So I don't know if I asked your question. If not, I am ready to go on.
No, you did that perfectly, and it's always very good to hear that the Admiralty Court is posing a lot of thought in terms of working towards safety, not only applying penalties, but also improving procedures and making recommendations. This is always very important. And I would like to thank you once again for your participation. I think you will be able to stay a little longer with us. If any other participant would like to address any comments or questions, feel free to use the chat for Admiral Lima Filho. And if I may, at last, make another small advertisement, because I know on May 25, there will be the workshop of the Admiralty Court. You've mentioned the BR of the sea, our roadway of the sea, let's say, and also the 40 years of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea will be the topics of the Admiralty Court's workshop in the end of May. Thank you again, Admiral Lima Filho. It's always an honor to have your presence with us.
Thank you, Dr. Pedro. Really, I forgot to do this announcement. Thank you very much. I invite all of you, the 25th of May at 9 o'clock at the channel of the Brazilian Maritime Court in YouTube. Last time we had 1,200 people. And this year, my goal is to reach 2,000 people. So please, I ask all of you to disseminate. That will be my last workshop as the president of the Maritime Court, as I'm going to leave you in the 30th of July. So I invite all of you to be there discussing with us those two important issues. The first, BR of the Sea, and also to talk a bit about the Convention of the Sea.
We will certainly be pleased to attend and participate. And actually, you didn't forget to mention, it is right in the first, when you open the Admiralty Court webpage and you mentioned you invited everybody to visit the website, it is right there. As soon as you open the website, all available information is right there. And I also invite all the participants to participate in that event, which is also very good. Thanks once again, Admiral. Always a pleasure. And I would like now to address the words to Lewis McDonald, extending our compliments for your presence, Lewis. I know you are now handling a big wreck removal situation, and you are about to go into a mediation meeting soon. So it is a great honor to have your presence this morning here in Brazil to talk about the P&I perspective of a casualty response, especially in the offshore sector. And I am also delighted to also have the presence of a representative of School Offshore, with whom I had the privilege of spending some time in the past as an internship long years ago. So Lewis, thanks once again for your presence. Thanks once again for all the participation School has in the Brazilian offshore sector with its members. So it's good to have you here this morning, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lucas, and thank you also to Vice Admiral. If I could just, I guess, offer a quick comment on something that was said by the Vice Admiral. One of the things that we do as an international insurer is we deal with claims in countries around the globe, and not every country that we operate in or have cause to operate in actually has a strong maritime court. And you can very much see the difference between countries where a court does exist and where one doesn't. So the work that is done in that sense is is very much appreciated by the industry generally, for sure. So thank you for your very informative presentation. Hopefully, I can give something perhaps not quite as good, but at least semi-interesting from the small part of this much wider operations that I, as a claims handler for a P&I club, am involved in. So just a little bit about Schooled to set the scene. Schooled are a P&I insurer, protection and indemnity insurer. That is essentially a sort of specialist third-party liability insurer. We don't insure the sort of substance of the assets. We insure the liabilities that flow from it. So in the context of a casualty situation, we have a very specific remit, which typically in a true casualty will focus on pollution and wreck removal aspects. I'll come a little bit back to that more later. P&I insurance comes out of the traditional shipping world, dealing with liabilities arising from transporting products from one place to another. But in the 1970s, when offshore exploration for oil became something that was very much in focus, the people who were pioneering that industry, many had come from traditional shipping backgrounds and understood that the way in which insurance liabilities were set out in the shipping world was both helpful and could translate to the offshore industry. So Schooled were one of the first P&I clubs that were contacted in the 1970s by those that were seeking to drill for oil off the coast of Norway. And we set up a specialist P&I coverage to deal only with offshore drilling units. Now, the Schooled offshore as it stands today deals not just with drilling units, but with some production units, but also all the assets, the specialised assets that are necessary for safely performing all these operations offshore. So it's a very wide spectrum of assets that we deal with, and there are any number of claims that arise out of this. Fortunately, if we look at statistics across our organisation, there are far fewer claims on a percentage basis from offshore operations than there are from traditional shipping operations. So from my perspective as a claims handler, that's a good thing. The concern is, however, when things go wrong in an offshore context, they can be much bigger claims, particularly when you're dealing with hydrocarbons coming out of the seabed. There are many examples over the years of very, very significant incidents arising from offshore operations, and that's enough to give all of us sleepless nights. But in terms of dealing with these incidents, that's what we're here to do. That's what we're here to support. So when the big incidents happen, that's when I guess we as a P&I insurer really start earning our wages, because our focus is to deal with these things as expeditiously as we can, but also as sensitively as we can, knowing full well that the circumstances we are dealing with are potentially extremely difficult for all the stakeholders that there will be in an offshore operation. So as I said, P&I covers the liabilities that ship owners or owners of assets have. One of the quirks of offshore insurance, or sorry, offshore operations, is that the contracts will typically assign in advance liability for incidents. So unlike in the traditional shipping world, there isn't always the focus on who caused the incident, whose fault it was. Fault will often have been assigned in contract in advance. So, for example, if there is a collision between two vessels, the contract will say that pollution from vessel A will be dealt with by vessel A's insurance, and pollution from vessel B will be dealt with by vessel B's insurance. The same can be the case for injuries to the crew. The same can be the case for the removal of the wreck of those vessels. So it's slightly different, but the principles in terms of the actual operations are very, very similar. But in terms of an incident offshore, the P&I cover will typically respond to pollution from the insured asset and claims associated to that, the removal of the wreck of the insured asset, claims from crew, and potentially other claims for liabilities from the collision or contact, are also as set out under the contract. It's very hard to give a prescriptive list of everything that the P&I insurance covers, because the cover in some ways is very broad. We don't have a sort of numerative list setting out factors A to Z that are covered. The cover is a little bit more flexible, I guess, than that. It's designed to look at the circumstances and respond accordingly, because we are here to protect the ship owners. So in terms of dealing with claims, the two big ones in an offshore casualty perspective are wreck removal and pollution. This picture here is from one of the wreck removals that I'm dealing with at the moment, and has taken up quite a lot of my time over the last year or so. This was a jack-up drilling unit which had an incident during jacking operations, tilted and subsequently capsized to the seabed. So we are in the process of dealing with the liabilities that arise from that, which are many and varied. As a starting point from the P&I perspective, when handling claims, it's important to note that there's often an interaction between the various insurance policies that are in place. If there is an incident involving a unit, let's say that there has been a tilting of a jack-up break, that's not necessarily always immediately a wreck removal operation. It could be a salvage operation, and that salvage operation could be performed under the hull and machinery, the property cover insurance. So something that is extremely important when dealing with a marine casualty, and offshore casualties specifically, is understanding where the covers lie, and establishing very early in the operations good communications with all the stakeholders, with the insurers, so that everyone is on the same page in terms of operations, with the authorities, so that everyone knows how the communication should go, what is required, and having those clear lines of communication helps everybody. Establishing a dialogue with the stakeholders is something that we focus very much on. Understanding the expectations is extremely important and helps for as positive a resolution as possible. The Vice Admiral mentioned when he was speaking earlier the blue Amazon, the way that Brazil looks on its seas. That's something that has to be borne in mind as well in terms of our operations. Different jurisdictions approach things very, very differently, and applying what you know from one casualty is helpful in dealing with another, but that also has to be viewed in the context of the general operations and the requirements of the jurisdiction in which you're operating. So speaking to the stakeholders, the authorities, the relevant parties very early on to understand what the requirements are is extremely, extremely important. And also, it would be naive of us to come into to a different jurisdiction, a new jurisdiction, and think that we know everything. We don't. We may have plans in mind as to how we would approach the pollution operation, clear-up operations, or the wreck removal operations. But there's local experience there that will very much impact upon how that can be carried out. And it's extremely important as a claims handler that we utilise that experience and we work with those who have experience in the jurisdiction, who know what they're doing there, who know what the procedures are and how things should be carried out, in order that, again, we can complete these operations as seamlessly as possible. And when it comes to things being seamless, and going back to my earlier example of the transition from salvage, which is being carried out by the hull and machinery insurers, to wreck removal being carried out by the P&I insurers, what nobody wants is a situation that there is a hard line that is drawn at that stage, and things potentially falling between the two parties that are dealing with it. It's extremely important for a successful operation that if there is this transition from property insurance to liability insurance, that's as seamless as it possibly can be, and that nobody really notices that there has been a change in the ownership at an insurance level of the problem. Something that we have seen throughout our time is that every case, be it a pollution, be it a wreck removal, it turns on its very own circumstances. Past experience is helpful in terms of dealing with it, but operations become much more sophisticated with every passing year. The way that claims can be handled is developing so fast. Projects that simply weren't possible 10 years ago now are becoming commonplace. We're dealing with more and more sophisticated operations in terms of removing wrecks, in terms of chasing pollution, responding to that. So something that was perhaps not feasible 5 years ago may be feasible now, and has to be looked at specifically. But in terms of dealing with those operations, one of the things that I think is always extremely important to bear in mind is that the plan as you set out will always have some challenges in it. The plan will always evolve, and getting to the solution at the end via the path that is set out at the very beginning is extremely unlikely. There will be diversions in the road that you travel, but it is important that these inevitable changes that come up with are managed, and that's where we as P&I claims handlers, or claims handlers generally, that's where we earn our corn, dealing with the difficulties that are associated with these offshore operations. In addition to dealing with quite sophisticated and complicated projects, you also have to factor in the challenge of doing those at sea, the weather, the wave conditions. These things can have a significant effect. I'm currently involved in a wreck removal process where the plan has changed multiple times because the sea and the weather has had such an impact on the unit that it's ultimately been broken, been damaged, and the plan that was put in place was no longer conceivable because heavy weather had affected it significantly. But it's how you deal with that change that's really important. But that leads on to dealing with the managing and working with the other stakeholders. Everyone understands that these things can happen. It's typically surprise that causes issues rather than the fact that something has happened. So working in close cooperation with all the stakeholders is extremely important. Communication is paramount. Working out how we can perform operations that works for everyone is extremely important. And also something that's an additional challenge and necessitates this high level of communication is often these incidents happen within live operational fields where there are other assets, there are other companies, contractors looking to perform or continuing to perform work, and working around that is a real challenge. Something that we are dealing with at the moment is on a wreck removal operation is we need to use saturation divers to perform the work because of the depth that we're operating at. But having saturation divers in the water necessitates having an exclusion zone around them. They won't work if there are operations being conducted on the surface within a sort of 500-meter exclusion zone. So dealing with simultaneous operations against that background in a live offshore field is extremely challenging, and that's why communication is so important. One of the things that I always think of when people ask me what my job is that in many ways we're project managers. We deal with the project of dealing with the pollution, of dealing with the wreck removal. And part of that is in terms of selecting the correct resources for each job. Lawyers are important, technical experts are important, surveyors and various specialists are important. And one of the things that we've seen recently, we've done recently, is to try and speed up the process and make the process more consistent, is performing our own detailed surveys of units that have sunk, that are now considered to be wrecks. In the past, wreck removal operations were typically bid for against the background of parties not actually knowing what they were going in to find, which meant that the contract duration was likely extremely lengthy, extremely costly, and planning had to be done on an ad hoc basis. But with the significant increases that we now have in survey capability, it's possible to put together a very, very detailed survey that's made available to all contractors, so that all parties understand what the situation is on the seabed. A specific plan can be created for responding to that, and hopefully you have an operation that's completed successfully, but more swiftly, because the situation on the seabed is known to everyone before they start, rather than just having to deal with what they find on the site. So the better the information that's provided in advance, the better the project can be managed. And this is something that I think that we will see a lot more of in future. That is the detailed assessment of the situation on the ground before operations start, rather than sending in salvers with lots of equipment to work out how they can do it while they're on site. So just to finish, some general top tips for successfully navigating a casualty from an insurance perspective. First of all, early engagement with stakeholders is extremely important. Adopting a proactive approach to the management of all potential aspects of the claim is necessary, and that involves speaking with the authorities, with other interested parties, making sure that the information is properly provided so that there's an understanding of what's going on. And that takes us on to working collaboratively. Taking a collaborative approach to dealing with a big incident typically provides a much more positive result at the end. Putting together an appropriate team to deal with the incident is important, and it should be the current incident rather than necessarily following what was done in previous circumstances. And generally, from sort of your own mental health perspective, acknowledging that the response won't go wholly seamlessly. There will always be challenges. There will be difficulties faced along the way, but it's how one responds to those challenges that is key. And just as a sort of final sales pitch, I guess, on a top tip for navigating a casualty basis, letting your insurers know as soon as possible it is always extremely helpful. We have a lot of experience in dealing with these matters, so we can handle much more than just or can assist with just much more than just the operational things. Strategy, how to deal with it, and dealing with the stresses that come with a casualty are all things that we know about. And the sooner we know about it, the sooner we can start helping you and dealing with casualty as hopefully successfully as possible. So those are my very quick thoughts on what is a very wide area. There are many questions that could arise from this. I'm happy to answer any that you do have, but for the moment, I'll just pass things back to Lucas.
Many thanks, Lou. It's all very nice to hear your words and your thoughts, and a bit of yours and school's experience in handling casualty response. One point I found it really interesting on your presentation is when you mentioned that lawyers are important. I always like to emphasize that as well, if you know why. But I personally always enjoy the excuse of leaving the computer screen and the air conditioning in the office and going on to the field, as I could not make my career in the Navy or working offshore. But whenever I have the opportunity, I always like to attend. But unfortunately, the lawyer's presence is normally mistaken with problem, because normally there's a problem around. So I would like to emphasize lawyers are also a part of the solution rather than the problem. And it was good that you raised this point. And I would like to address more of a comment than a question about valuing clubs' participation and performance in terms of this kind of situation. Because I know judges of the Admiralty Court, I know Admiral Lima Filho, they are always a big fan of the clubs' actions and initiatives. We've seen that in past cases where P&I clubs were involved, where P&I clubs were not involved, and how the cases were handled very differently, especially one just like Schooled with its long-standing reputation, so Schooled offshore team. And I know Brazil can be a very difficult jurisdictions in terms of our laws normally are not entirely connected with the international systems and conventions that are applied in other jurisdictions. We have a very aggressive environmental protection laws. If talking about your field of work, wreck removals, normally there should be a lot of challenges in Brazil when you are operating in very deep waters, right? If there is any subsea facilities and installations and you have to protect those, we're dealing about very difficult operations. So it's always good to have Schooled offshore participating in covering risks in the Brazilian offshore exploration and activities. And I am certain also you pass on to your members your experience from old cases to help them implement good measures, learn about their experience. So I think it is always good to emphasize the club's presence, and we always enjoy having Schooled here with us today. And helping us protect our environment. Thanks, Lewis.
Well, thank you for that, Lucas. And just to say, absolutely. I mean, we do spend a lot of time educating our membership on things that have happened in the past. Just again, following exactly what the Vice Admiral said earlier, learning from experience is essential. So it doesn't have to be the experience of the individual ship owner. It can be other ship owners and learning from that. So the better that we can educate our membership about dealing with incidents, about incidents that happened, how these can be avoided, then that's very much part of our philosophy as an insurance company.
Many thanks, Lewis. With that, Admiral, you want to address some final words?
Before leaving, dear Mr. Lucas Leite, thank you for the invitation, but this presentation was outstanding, and it is a very, very important point. And the state of the flag, learn how to give importance and value to P&I when we have really a large wreck in our coast. And here we have this experience. So it's very important that the state of the flag really check if the P&I of that ship is associated with a P&I club. But this must be a requirement. Because there are some situations where you have the accident, and when you need the P&I does not cover that problem. Here in 2017, 16, I have to change one rule because we have here a problem in north of Brazil. And today it is important to check the quality of the P&I, if it really is associated to a P&I club. I just want to do this remark, present my compliments to our speaker. This is a very, very important issue, Dr. Lewis, and I think would have here hours of discussion about this subject. So now I have to leave. Thank you very much, Dr. Lucas Leite, for the invitation. Congratulations for all the speakers, and I will be always available here to discuss and go on working for the justice and safety of navigation. Thank you very much, and a good end of event for all of you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Admiral.
And from my side as well, I apologize that I have to leave early, but thank you very much for the invitation. I'm sure that the next speakers will do a fantastic job. I'm sorry that I can't hear you, but if the recording is made available, I'll definitely make sure to listen back to it when I have the opportunity. So thank you very much for the invitation, everybody, and thank you for your time.
And thanks, Lewis. I hope you have a good mediation meeting for your wreck removal case. Thanks for enjoying your time here with us and making a very interesting presentation. We very much value schools' participation and presence, just like Admiral Lima Filho just mentioned. Very reputable P&I club, member of the international group. So it's always good to have you watching our backs in terms of operations in Brazilian offshore sector. Thank you very much. And thank you, Admiral Lima Filho. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. And without further ado, I would just like to introduce our next speaker, Commander Maria Cecilia Trindade de Castro. As I mentioned, is the current Chief of Environmental Department at the DPC, the Directorate of Ports and Coasts. Commander Cecilia will be very much delighted to hear your speech on the role of the Brazilian Maritime Authority in the prevention of marine pollution caused by vessels, platforms, and their support facilities. Please, the microphone is yours.
Well, hello. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
And it's certainly a special morning, starting with Vice Admiral Lima Filho and then Mr. Lewis MacDonald. And now I will try to keep the standard. And first of all, I want to thank King Kate and Mendes Viana Law Firm for the invitation to get part in this seminar. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the Superintendent of Environment of the Directorate of Ports and Coasts, who is also the Navy representative for the Evaluation and Monitoring Group of the Brazilian Contingency Plan on Oil Spill, in brief PNC. I am Commander Cecilia. I'm an oceanographer. I have a PhD on marine science. And I'm the head of the Department of Environment Affairs for the Coastal Zone and Brazilian Jurisdictional Waters. So without further ado, my presentation here today has the intention to describe the role, briefly describe the role of the Brazilian Maritime Authority in the prevention of marine pollution caused by vessels, platforms, and their support facilities. This is the roadmap of the presentation, starting with a brief description of the Brazilian Maritime Authority structure, and then talking a little bit on the subject, marine pollution caused by ships, of course, including platforms and support facilities. The third topic is on the National Contingency Plan, recently modified by a new decree in January this year. And one of the biggest changes is related to the Evaluation and Monitoring Group. So that's the next topic of the presentation, followed by the operational coordination that starts when the PNC is activated. And finally, last but not least, I will talk briefly on our experience with the first activation of PNC in 2019. So the Brazilian Maritime Authority is enforced by the Navy Commander, which means that the Navy Commander, the Brazilian Navy Commander is the Brazilian Maritime Authority, is the same person by law. So he is advised by the Navy Chief of Staff and represented by other naval authorities according to the subject. So depending on the subject, another naval authority is going to represent our Navy Commander, our Brazilian Maritime Authority. So for instance, the Chief of Naval Operations is his representative for issues related to maritime safety and for marine pollution, together with the Director General of Navigation and of course the subordinate bodies. In that sense, and following the naval ranking, we have as the Maritime Authority representative for maritime safety and marine pollution, the Directorate of Ports and Coasts, where I work, and the naval districts. They are spread along the coast, so they are like arms of the Maritime Authority, as well as other maritime authorities responsible for representing the Maritime Authority, the other naval authorities responsible for representing the Maritime Authority, as we can see in this slide, for other issues, like for Antarctic and sea resources. And on the other side of the line, We have the Maritime Authority agents, as mentioned by Vice Admiral Lima Filho, the captaincies, the legacies, and the agencies of the captaincies. They are like the executive arms. They deal with the routine issues of the maritime authorities. And in short, we must say that the Brazilian Maritime Authority enforces, under the Naval Command, national and international regulations in waters under the Brazilian jurisdiction, and carries out inspections for the protection of human life, the safety of navigation, and the prevention of environmental pollution. So going to the next point, let's start thinking on a ship. So in terms of resources, what she consumes and what comes out from her. I mean, what goes in and what comes out from a ship. So we may think that in terms of going in, the ship consumes like oil, water, air, and what it brings out of the ship. So garbage, cargo residues, oily water, sewage, anti-fouling system waste, ballast water, I mean, other oxides, super oxides, nitrogen oxides, incineration ashes, a substance that deplete the ozone layer, and cargo fumes. But at the same time, we may think that it's almost comfortable to think that we have international regulatory instruments for each of these effluents, which are going to work most of the time. However, it might not be enough in some situations, since these controls are proactive controls, mainly based on records, certificates, and basically based on documents. So it's not that simple, that's what I'm trying to say. In terms of the subject, the way it is covered in the Brazilian law, I would mention just a few laws related to the subject. And we have a good framework on this. And starting with our main law, the Federal Constitution of Brazil, in its article, the third paragraph of Article 225, it states that the conducts and activities considered harmful to the environment shall subject the violators, so it's shall, I mean, it's mandatory, individuals and legal entities to penal and administrative sanctions, irrespective of the obligation to repair the damage caused. Of course, here is the pollution pays principle, yeah. And there are many other laws, and I try to highlight just a few ones that we deal in a routine basis. The law on the waterway traffic safety law and its degree, because in Brazil we need a degree to implement the law. The environmental crimes law as well, and its decree, 6,514 from 2008. The water pollution law, like this one is very, I mean, it's really routine for us, and its decree, 4136. And of course, the new decree on the National Contingency Plan that, well, actually, I missed the previous one because this new decree, it didn't revoke the previous one. It updated the previous one. It's the 8,127 from 2013. So regarding this new decree on the National Contingency Plan for Oil Spill, it states that Article 1, this decree addresses the National Contingency Plan for Oil Pollution Incidents in water under national jurisdiction, PNC in short, is the acronym, in order to establish responsibilities, organizational structure, guidelines, procedures, and actions with the following objectives. The one is enable the coordinator action of public administration agencies and public and private entities in the expansion of the response capacity in oil pollution incidents that may affect waters under national jurisdiction. 2, to minimize environmental damage, and 3, to avoid damage to public health. So the new decree, it amended the previous one at some points. I just try to highlight the main ones. The first one I would like to highlight is the permanent character of the evaluation and monitoring group, the GAA, as we call it in short. The establishment of a coordinator of the group, different from the operational coordinator. So the operation coordinator only exists when PNC is activated. However, now we have a group coordinator on a rotating basis. So the mandate is for 2 years, and it started when the decree was published. And the order established in the law is first is the Brazilian Navy, so now we are in charge, then IBAMA, and then INP, and so on and so forth. Also the establishment of the Integrated Action Network. So instead of having the executive and support committees that we used to have in the previous decree, now we have the Integrated Action Network, just one. And most of the tasks from the, not most, I would say most of the tasks from the support committee was transferred for this network, but most of the tasks from the executive committee is now in charge of, is now actually transferred for the GAA. So just to give you an idea of how this Integrated Action Network is diverse, represented by many different entities from the federal public administration, like the civil house of the presidency, many different ministers, ministries of economy, justice, foreign affairs, science, technology and innovation, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Environment, of course, and many others. And this slide is to bring us like a comparative figure of the organogram we used to have in the first decree and the organogram we have now with the new one. So starting with the national authority, it seems that nothing has changed. However, in the previous decree, the national authority was the Ministry of Environment, while in the new decree, the national authority is the Minister of Environment. So it's he or herself. And the three main groups we used to have, the GAA, the Executive Committee, and the Support Committee, are now 2 groups, the GAA with a permanent status, and the Integrated Action Network. As I said before, most of the tasks, the duties attributed to the Executive Committee are now tasks from GA. And most of the tasks formally attributed to the support committee are now duties for the Integrated Action Network. And the Navy is part of all the groups as we used to be in the previous one. So in terms of the composition of the evaluation and monitoring group, it is composed as it used to be by the Navy, by the National Institute for Environment and Natural Resources, IBAMA, and by the National Petroleum, Petroleum, Gas and Biofuel Agency. And as main tasks, actually, there are many other tasks. I only select a few. I would like to say that the GA must monitor and evaluate any oil spills caused by ships, regardless of its significance. So it's different from the previous one. So at this time, it doesn't matter, or from now on, from January on, it doesn't matter how big is the spillage. It must be evaluated and monitored by GA. And it also has the possibility. Now it's interesting, it's an interesting aspect from this NEO degree that now we have the possibility to activate area plans. I mean, as provided in OPRC Convention, the International Convention on Oil Pollution, Preparedness, Response, and Cooperation. We have the area plans. So whenever the GAA consider necessary, or in case the facilities involved in the accident haven't activated it yet, we can activate area plans along the coast. And as I said before, there is the establishment of a operational coordinator as long as the plan is activated. So there are some requirements that, I mean, someone from the group, from GAA, is going to be in charge, but there are some requirements that we must follow. And in case the accident, the event of an oil spill occurs in maritime waters and inland waters between the coast and the strait baseline, as provided in the United Nations Conventions on the Law of the Sea, the Brazilian Navy is going to be in charge. It's going to be the operational coordinator. Then the IBAMA is going to be, someone from IBAMA is going to be in charge in the event of an incident of oil pollution, a spillage that takes place in internal waters, except when it occurs in waters between the coast and the strait baseline from which the territorial sea is measured. And the ANP, the agency, the National Agency for Petroleum, Gas and Biofuel, is going to be in charge in the event of an oil pollution incident involving underwater oil drilling and production structures. So it's interesting to highlight that it says in the decree that the operation coordinator is responsible with the support of the Integrated Action Network to coordinate in order of priority the safety of human life, the protection of the environment, and the integrity of properties and installations threatened or affected by the oil discharge. So the Integrated Action Network have the back of the operational coordinator. So finally, going to the last point of the presentation, I said I was going to talk briefly about the first activation of the plan, of the National Contingency Plan. So it started with some oil fragments appearing in Paraíba, in the state of Paraíba, in Pernambuco, at the very end of August 2019, in the northeastern region of Brazil. From there, the oil spill started popping up in many other different beaches along the coast from different states, mainly in the northeastern of Brazil, for months. So we didn't have a clue about what was happening, since we didn't know. I mean, no platform, no ship was blamed or was identified as the responsible for the spillage. And this first picture in your left shows the very beginning of the emergency. And the one in your right shows at the end of the emergency, when PNC was declared inactivated. And at that point in March 20, I'm sorry, the date is wrong here. It was March 2020. So at that point, we had like 11 states hit by oil, and almost half of the coast covered by oil, like 3,600 kilometers of the coast. This one is an overview of the data on the fauna affected by the incident. And we see that marine turtles were heavily struck by the oil incident. Some of them were able to survive, but most of them were dead because of the spillage. And in addition, we tried to monitor the oil. We conducted many monitoring actions at the sea by ships, by airplanes, drone aircrafts, satellite images, couldn't perceive the oil. It was very dense oil, and it was already weathered after many days at the sea. So most occasions it was able to perceive, to realize the oil when it was already at the coast, causing a lot of problems for the localities where it struck. So, and demanding as well a constant effort from the Navy, from the IBAMA, from all the volunteers, and for the state agencies as well, to effort and to monitor and cleaning the beach, not only the beach, but it hit other types of coastal environments as well, like mangroves and coral reefs. And regarding the cause, the source of this problem, so where the oil was coming from. So we started looking for the cause. We started with the monitoring of tanker ships around the region, navigating around the region. And it was conducted by the Naval Maritime Traffic Control since the beginning. And of course, previous dates before the first time the oil hit the Brazilian coast. At the same time, when the oil chemical profile was identified, was known, researchers from federal institutions and from the Naval Modeling Group, they start developing regressive mathematical modeling. Since we didn't know the source, but we knew where the oil was hitting, so it was like regressive. So let's try to understand where was the source, and it was far, far from the coast. So the strategy at that point was to cross-checking the information coming from the Naval Maritime Trafficking Control and Traffic Control, and the modeling results to try to understand which ship could be in the position to cause the spillage. Well, I guess that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your patience. And I don't know if it's going to be any Q&A session, but we can catch up if there is one. Thank you very much.
Commander Cecilia, we are the ones to thank you for showing us some of the first stressful situation that happened some years ago, right? I think our National Contingency Plan, first enacted in 2013, was really put to an unthinkable test when these happened. If you think about incidents before this one, I think no one could ever imagine something that significant hitting almost half of our coastal line, right? Like that, with the unknown source coming out from high seas. And especially a big warning for us, not only in terms of learning about this and acting quickly to solve any open dots and any miscommunication that ever happened. And it's very good to see the authorities working out in enhancing the National Contingency Plan with the new regulation, in working out better ways to solve these problems, to communicate and to actively monitor and participate in these response actions. It is a big lesson that we have learned. We have seen practical measures being adopted to implement other responses. I think it's also time, and I know the Navy Authority is also eager in pushing this forward for Brazil to take a good look into some of the international conventions that there are and that we have not adopted yet, that could have helped us in some ways in similar events, just like this one, like CLC, LMC, and other conventions. I think it is a good answer to the lessons that we have learned, not only triggering response actions, enhancing our procedures, but also taking a look into the conventions. And I thank you for all the support and the active participation in the actions taken in that event and in the actions moving forward, in learning the lessons and applying better results and trying to avoid that. Because in the old days when we had, not here in Brazil, but affected the whole world, the Macondo incident in the Gulf, Brazilian government at the time was cheering that it would have never happened in Brazil because our coasts and our wind and sea currents and tides would not bring the oil to our coasts, and that Brazil was protected by nature, that God was Brazilian. And I think we should actually deal just like the way the authorities have been dealing recently, enhancing the plans, preparing for the worst, preparing for unthinkable situations. And we will never be fully prepared because things will always change. So we have to work ourselves hard to evolve in that. And thanks for the efforts the Navy authorities have been doing to that extent. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
And moving on with the speeches of today, now we are going to attract the attention of the private industry working in the offshore field. And I would like to call Hugo Fernandes, Executive Director at Brand Offshore, to just extend a few words, Hugo, on a view of the private sector, especially you coming from a very important player in the Brazilian offshore industry, working with a big fleet of offshore support vessels and massive participation in our field. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Hugo. The floor is yours.
Hi, sorry, I was trying to get out of the mute here and share my screen at the same time. Good morning, all. Thank you for the attendance. I would like to thank Kincaid for the participation in this forum. I think it's a very important topic. I will focus here on this presentation on talking about on actions, investments we do in people and technology to prevent the casualties. Just doing a little introduction. I'm Hugo Fernandes. I'm a naval architect and marine engineer. Been working in the offshore support vessel industry for almost 20 years. And today I'm director of PREM Offshore, like Lucas said. I'd also like to thank the Maritime Court, DPC, Navy, and SCOLD, because they have all support us here in Brazil. It's almost 30 years of, a little more than 30 years of operations, and always been a good relationship with all of you. So, I chose 3 topics that we have been taking a lot of efforts and investments to make our operations safer. So I'll talk about the culture, the safety culture of the company, training our people, which was already touched by a few people in previous presentations, and also the technology that support us to be more efficient. Why am I talking about safety culture on a loss prevention casualty response webinar? Because safety comes first, always. And if someone in our team or your team doesn't believe the company is fully support them to stop any operation when they see something or feel something unsafe, we have a problem. So everyone has to understand that they have the authority to stop any operation. And that comes where we talk about safety culture. They have to understand it. So it's our job to be reinforcing, reminding, making them understand that leadership will always support them. And that's essential for our success. It always takes one link, one weak link to break a chain. So if one person in the entire team doesn't understand it, it can happen an accident. So that's why safety culture is very important in this topic to prevent any casualty from happening, and leadership has to be involved, because if not, the message doesn't go and they do not engage in it. So that's why I started talking about safety culture on preventing losses. Then I'll talk a little bit about training, and this has been one of our focus in the last few years, like training our people. Our people are our most valuable asset, and without them, we can't do much. So about 2 years ago, we said, how can we improve the training experience of our employees? And we started developing a platform to customize and make a better experience to them. We created an online platform, was a little before the pandemic coming, so it was almost perfect timing. It has been a great experience. We are developing our employees on technical skills, regulatory, organizational, behavioral, all the topics that are important, not only to develop the work they do, but also them as a professional. So the feedback has been great. Today is more than 4,000 employees participating on these courses, always giving feedback, always asking some important topics to be added. So this is a very important investment, because if the employees are not trained, doesn't matter how much we invest in equipment, accidents will happen. So the training and the engagement is very important on that. And then in 2020, when the pandemic started, we saw ourselves with a challenge. From one day to the other, almost all of our experienced leaders offshore were considered group of risk, and we could not put them offshore anymore. And how to fill this gap and make sure that with the people coming in new, the new leaders just moving up, how to cover this gap. So we started a program with the leaders that were in the group of risk. We started a mentoring program. We prepared with them, them to be mentors, to teach and pass to the new leaders and also new employees our culture, our safety culture, our systems, our procedures, talk about the company, make them understand our missions, our values. So we got some captains, some chief engineers that could not embark anymore because of the pandemic, and they started teaching as mentors to our new employees. And this program, I could not be happier with the results, the feedback. They keep in touch with every new employee for 1 year. That's 6 embarks. They talk to them before they go to the vessel, during the embark, and after when they are home to change experience. So it's a very good program. And also we added 49 cadets from the maritime school in our group this year, and they all going through the mentoring program too, which is helping them to develop much faster during this period that they have to do to graduate and become officers. So this mentoring program really helped us to fill the gap with the leadership on board and having the experience. So that was a very good program to make sure we would not have accidents due to lack of experience of the crew. Also, we could not embark so many people on the vessels. And then technology. We all do preventive and reactive maintenance, but what about predictive maintenance, right? The investment on sensors, systems, software, all of this bring us predictions. So the investment that we have been doing is allowing us to monitor the trends of several equipment on our vessels. And with our software, we have some machine learning that predicted failures before it happens. So I'll give a little example, like a simple shaft bearing that is being monitored. The system, the software, will learn the trend of the temperature that works for each operational condition. And the moment that temperature or vibration, depends on the sensors you have, and the moment that any behavior of that piece of equipment changes, notification is sent to the team. And then the team can start troubleshooting to identify the cause of the change on the trend way before the failure. So at that moment, we can decide if we have to stop the operation because it's critical to act immediately before there is a failure, or if we can continue monitoring and can continue the operation safely to go action when the vessel is on port, without stopping the operation. So if don't have the predictive maintenance, the equipment can fail without you being notified earlier. So in any equipment failure, like if you are operating on the peak, can cause a very big accident. Can be an oil spill, hit on a platform, or any type of accident. So it's the equipment, the predictive maintenance has been a big player on reducing casualties, and it's an area that we have been investing a lot to have a safer operations. So I hope I don't go too fast. I want to make sure we stay on the time. I know Pedro is still going to talk after me, and don't want to go over too much. I chose these 3 topics because of the importance I see and the change that it was for us. And if you all have any questions, I'll pass back to Lucas. Thank you.
Many thanks, Hugo. Very, very, very good to hear. We can certainly see why offshore gets its great track record in terms of safety. And even though you are still always improving, which is great, you know, we are used to see when a problem comes, people talking about commercial pressure to do something, top-down orders to proceed in a certain way. And we are very happy to see that if there's any top-down order at Run Offshore, is an order that anyone is the eye and the safety of the company when they are out there. So I think it's a good message to all crew members that they are the ones in whom the company can rely to be to their good judgment, to be their eyes on board and to stop any operations they are uncomfortable with. Thanks for sharing that view in terms of loss prevention. And I am happy now to address the word to Pedro Perez, Chief Operating Officer at Wheat O'Brien's. And Pedro, we will be eager to hear what happens when something happens, how to react, how to respond. Let us hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, Lucas, thank you. Thank you for the introduction and thank you for the invitation. Let me just share my presentation. Okay. So good morning or good afternoon, everyone, if you will. I will discuss a little bit about how to be ready to respond to an offshore emergency with the focus in Brazil, but addressing general technical aspects of any type of response worldwide. So just a quick introduction about who we are. So with O'Brien's, we are a joint venture between American consultancy company with O'Brien's and the Brazilian group Ocean Pact Serviços Marítimos, a Brazilian company specialized in providing sustainable solutions for the use of the sea. And we are a consultancy company specialized in 3 major disciplines, so emergency and crisis management, risk and operational safety, and environmental management. So putting all these 3 subjects together, you can pretty much understand what we provide in terms of solutions to our clients, including a lot of companies in the offshore sector. So first, I would like to invite you all to relax a little bit and watch this video. So just a little joke, because as we don't have Superman, or I think at least we cannot count on him, we need to be prepared. This is just a initial provocation. So as we did not have the Superman, we actually learned a lot from past oil spill accidents, right? So I will bring up some of the major lessons learned here. So the first one, too many bosses. So all the time an accident happens, just right away, too many bosses show up to try to manage the accident and the response. A lot of trainees on Superman show up as well. So courage is not enough. Actually, courage in an oil spill response, actually you will increase the risk of the response. And this is actually not going to be a good idea. You want to have always a safe response. Responsibilities were confusing. So too many bosses also leading to unknown responsibilities, who do what, and so on. Lack of coordination leading to lack of prioritization. So what we do first, what we do second, where to focus on at each time of the response. If someone tells them to do something, they say, I don't work for him. So just summarizing, putting all this in the same box, actually the systematic lessons learned mostly for organizations, for private organizations, is the need for the organization to keep the chaos under control and increase response effectiveness. Because all this together, basically what happens is that you increase chaos and decrease the effectiveness of your response. So this is actually the two things that you don't want. So how to be ready to respond? And I will go briefly on the key elements of an effective response. So the first key element is understand the environment. So we better protect what we know than what we don't know. So the focus here is to minimize uncertainty and understand the environment and everything around you. So good practices shows that knowing and mapping the ecosystems, the priority sites for protection, the list of species in the region or a potentially affected region, as I will show after in the risk assessment, conservation units, available infrastructure, quite important, because if you have an emergency, you need to know the access to the places, what you have available in each one of the places. This is quite important, mostly for sensitive and more unknown areas. Access restrictions, stakeholders, ocean dynamics, so you can foresee the behavior of the oil spill and you can do like follow-up of the oil sheen over time. So all this together, put together in a GIS, geographic information system. So this is the first key element. The second one is the risk assessment, or the stage where you evaluate the risks. This is a quite important step. This is very critical for the planning and defining the focus of the plans that you will develop on the next stage. So at this stage, you can adopt qualitative risk assessment methodologies up to more quantitative methods, like some advanced mathematical risk modeling, depending on the risk of your activity. But the major objective of this step here is to understand the focus of all your plans that you will have to develop. And then I go to the next key elements, the plans. So after evaluating the risks, you will understand all the scenarios, all the potentially affected areas, so the areas that are more exposed to the risks of an oil spill. And then you can start with your oil spill contingency plan. In Brazil, we call here the PEI. Plano de Emergência, PEI stands for Plano de Emergência Individual for offshore activities, mostly for the oil and gas sector. So we'll provide all the guidelines for the initial response and how you will deal in these first initial moments of the response. Then, depending on the risk, you can have more detailed plans that can cover specific areas such as strategical protection plan, wildlife protection plan, tactical response plans that are plans more that are not limited to the strategic level, but provides detail on the tactics that you will adopt in each different areas in case the area is affected by an oil spill accident, for instance. The stakeholder engagement plan to understand and to previously map all your stakeholders in case of an oil spill that you will have to engage with. And also the training plan, which is basically a training matrix for all these plans showing who needs to be trained in what types of disciplines and which type of knowledge each one involved in each one of these plans must have, so that the response will be conducted by qualified personnel. Then leading to the next key element, equipment and qualified personnel. So as we always say, the plan is not enough. It's not enough to have a plan, a written plan, and this plan is just kept in your side. You have to put the plan into the real world, and to do this, it's like 90% based on having the right equipment and having the right qualified personnel ready in case an accident occurs. And last but not least, conduct the training and the exercise. You have to be always aware of keeping all personnel trained, and the exercises are quite important because in the exercises is where you actually test if everyone is ready or is not ready, or which points you need to improve, not only in terms of training, but also sometimes in terms of plan revision of the plans that were already developed. So the exercise is quite important to close this cycle because it's what allows the continuous improvement of the preparedness of any company to an oil spill or any type of accident indeed. And I will discuss a little bit about the ICS. ICS stands for Incident Command System, and the ICS is what actually puts all these key elements together. So the ICS is a framework for managing accidents of any type and any size, and it was created to actually overcome the lessons learned from the past that I showed in the beginning of the presentation, mostly at the managerial level of a company of the private sector, but also for public sectors. In the US, the ICS is a lot of, it's adopted also not only for the private sector, but also a lot by the public sector indeed. So some advantages of the ICS is a fully tested methodology already used to manage major events, including the biggest oil spill we had recently, the Macondo blowouts. So it's a tested methodology, right? So it works in major events. It's recognized as a good practice, not only in the US, but now in Brazil and in other parts of the world. It's adjustable for accidents of any size and complexity, so it's not a tool made just for major spills. It also helps in accidents of any size and complexity. It's based on command and control, aligned with agreed objectives, provided administration and logistical and technical support for response teams, and is a standardized methodology. What it makes it easier to put different people to work together in different moments. So it's an organic system that can increase or decrease depending on the different moments of the accident. So just to finalize, giving a little bit of our framework here in Brazil. So mostly everything that I showed, it's quite, you can see happening, and actually it's part of the licensing process for oil and gas activities, ports and ship-to-ship operations. So if you see all these types of licensing process, you see in different steps the requirements to have an oil spill contingency plan, specific equipment and vessels to respond, the need for inspections to perform exercises and drills. And to finalize, I will let this question here. Is the lack of a framework specific for marine navigation. So mostly in case of ships, of international ships that just come and go from Brazil, like oil tankers, cargo vessels, cruise ships. We don't have such a strong framework. Of course, they all have to comply with MARPOL and international conventions. But when it comes to a major event, like a regional event that needs to mobilize more people to engage with government, and when you have a more complex scenario, we don't have a framework to cover this type of accidents, such as, for instance, you have in the USA and other countries in the figure of the qualified individual regulation and other regulations that accounts for this type of scenario from this type of activities. And I would like to thank you, Lucas, Kincaid, and everyone who watched the presentation almost during the lunchtime, and I'm available to answer to any queries.
Pedro, we are the ones to thank you for the interesting presentation. Unfortunately, we do not have Superman to protect our seas, but at least we are very happy to see your role and your activities in terms of understanding, evaluating, planning, and training. That's really important. And by holding this kind of discussion right here in this seminar, we are fulfilling an important role towards loss prevention. So that's why, with great enthusiasm, I would like to dedicate, on behalf of Kincaid and Mendes Viana Law Firm, a big thanks to our wonderful speakers for sharing such interesting views on loss prevention and casualty response. Such relevant topic certainly deserve to be in the agenda of our series of webinars, and the great number of participants really shows that the concern for the topic and ratify its importance. So thank you all for participating in this morning session, and we will certainly keep you posted on future agendas and future events. Stay safe and hope to see you all soon.
Okay, thank you, Lucas. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Cheers.